This is close to becoming the longest shutdown in U.S. history, which is astounding because the previous record is 35 days. I think we are at 35 days as of today. Wow. So it's just amazing how intransigent, from my opinion, Democrats have been. Senate Democrats have voted 13 times to keep the government shut down, which means that millions of Americans are losing SNAP benefits. Airports are canceling flights where, federal workers are not coming in because they haven't been paid. That people are living paycheck to paycheck and they depend on their salary to make things work, and people are no longer coming to work. Not only that, healthcare premiums are set to double 200 to 300%, which is unsustainable for 24 million Americans around the country. And this is not just a Democratic issue or Republican issue. This is a fundamentally American issue.
Yes.
In fact, the people who are most hit by the premium spikes are Republican, because 21 out of the 24 states that are most impacted are red states. So this is something that we want to take action on. But I very much admire the fortitude that Senator Thune has displayed on this issue, because he is saying, we want to negotiate on healthcare premiums. We want to keep healthcare costs down, but we will not negotiate with a gun held to our heads. And so I'd love to play a clip of him. I've never seen him so fiery. Honestly, I thought he was just, before he became Senate Majority Leader, I thought he was just Mitch McConnell's backbencher. But in recent months, he's really displayed some backbone. So why don't we play that clip of, this is Senator Thune.
Let me just point out, if I might, that we are 29 days into a Democrat shutdown. And the senator from New Mexico was absolutely right. SNAP recipients shouldn't go without food. People should be getting paid in this country. And we've tried to do that 13 times. And you voted no 13 times. This isn't a political game. These are real people's lives that we're talking about. And you all have just figured out, 29 days in, that, there might be some consequences. There are people who run out of money. Yeah, we're 29 days in.
All right.
And they've done their best to make sure that
so
a lot of
Connor.
these programs are funded.
I want to open it up to you guys. I just want to say one last thing. This is causing tremendous suffering because there are going to be people who choose to just not have insurance, which ironically will send insurance premiums spiking even more for everybody. But I do completely sympathize with the fact that we cannot be lurching from crisis to crisis. We cannot be negotiating with our gun held to our heads. And Chuck Schumer is more invested in his own political survival than he is about the welfare of Americans at whole. I want to hear your take on this, but I really feel like we have unions abandoning the Democrats. We have federal workers abandoning the Democrats. Democrats have taken... Chuck has Schumered himself into a no-win situation. He needs to say, we're going to open the government, but we also have to fix this healthcare crisis. So what do you ladies think?
I partly agree with you, and the area where I agree with you the most is where I do think both sides are in this conflict for their own political purposes, as opposed to carrying out what's necessary to take care of our people, the American people. I think in the case of what the Democrats are doing, there is pressure from the Democratic constituency for the Democratic Party to fight. And I think for the first time in a long time, the Democratic Party is fighting on the proper grounds, because healthcare premium spiking is going to hurt a lot of people. And as you correctly pointed out, interestingly enough, the constituency that's going to be hurt the most from those spiking prices is going to be Republican voters. But Democrats are fighting to do something about the extension of the subsidies nonetheless. And I think that's the right thing to do. You know, this argument from Thune about how, we're not going to negotiate with a gun to our heads, I don't even see it that way. I see this as, hey, you know what? This is an important issue that impacts Americans across the political spectrum. As members of Congress, it is your duty to look out for your constituency, to look out for the American people. So rather than seeing this as we don't want to give Democrats a win or this is all politics, what can we do to work together so we open the government back up, fund the government, and more importantly, ensure that Americans aren't going to deal with these insanely expensive premiums where they're no longer covered.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly follow up to you. You know, there's so many hacks in this industry, but
Totally.
you're not a hack. You are not a hack.
No,
you
I hope not.
care. No, let me tell you, I've seen a lot of them. You are not one. You care about the American people. I just want to say, though, I think you're giving Chuck Schumer a little bit too much credit, though, because he knows he's going to get primaried by AOC.
He's doing this for politics, for sure.
He absolutely is. And he had a precious little book tour in March, and he got shouted down by his own liberal base. So he's learned his lesson that he needs to fight. He's fighting not because of healthcare premiums mostly. Yes, that's a byproduct, but he's fighting for his political life.
Everyone has their own agenda.
You're right.
And even likewise with the Republicans as well, you know. I mean, it's now being stated several times that really they could concede to the Democrats to some extent, but apparently, so far as so many people are saying, a large part of the reason why they don't want to do that is because when they come back, there will be a forced vote on the Epstein files. This is something that Thomas Massie has been talking about. This is something that Marjorie Taylor Greene has spoken about, that the second the government is reopened, she will get on that floor and she will name names. So I think there's a high possibility that even if there was a perfectly conducive situation for the Republicans to say, okay, we found some middle ground here, let's get the government back open, let's get people, you know, their benefits and everything that they need, there may be some hesitation to do that for other agendas that they may possibly have as well, i.e. the Epstein list.
Okay, I gotta say, I didn't even think about that, but it makes so much sense because this is not politically advantageous for the Republican Party either, right? Because if healthcare premiums spike, they're gonna blame the Republicans for it, not the Democrats, because Democrats are on the record fighting to extend the subsidies.
So I'm gonna bash Democrats here first, and then I'm gonna bash Republicans.
Nice.
So the biggest lie sold about the Affordable Care Act was if you like your health care, you can keep it.
Right.
Biggest lie sold in American politics. The household costs for middle-class families, the two biggest costs that are absolutely crushing the American middle class are the cost of college and the cost of health care. And the Affordable Care Act has done nothing to meaningfully make those health care costs more affordable for that income bracket of families. Also, it created a system where the young and the healthy fund the entire healthcare system for the old and the sick. Because if you remember in the original Affordable Care Act, they have it locked in that it's a 3-to-1 ratio. The old and the sick can only be charged up to 3 times what a young and healthy patient can be charged. But the real cost is actually about 5 times of that. So you now have a system where young, healthy Americans are funding the entire system for the old and the sick. Also, these subsidies. These subsidies that the Democrats have shut down the American government over, which, let's be clear, that means military troops going without paychecks if it wasn't for the Trump administration stepping in, millions of Americans losing SNAP benefits. They were willing to shut down the government over these subsidies. Well, let's get into what these subsidies are. These subsidies did not exist before 2021.
That's right.
They were subsidies that were put in place when Biden was in office, when Democrats controlled Congress, and they were put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic. They were always designed to be temporary. They were written into law to only last 2 years. So you don't get to shut down the government over a law that you wrote when you had power and you only made it temporary. If you wanted those subsidies to last, you should have written the law to last more than 2 years when you had power. You don't have power now. So you can either win elections, but it's not Republicans' fault that when you had power, you wrote the subsidies to always be temporary. And you do not get to shut down the government over that. Also, we're not talking about the fact that, Democrats are holding the government hostage over also wanting to extend healthcare coverage to illegal immigrants. And it's a language game that they are playing to try and fool the American public.
Okay, explain that to me, because I really want to learn, I want to understand what the right is referring to when they say this, because I've looked into it. And look, in California, for instance, there have been audits that show that federal money that is not supposed to go to undocumented people did end up going to undocumented people, but it's not supposed to. That's against the law, and that's why the audit was done. So what is going on in which, there's this argument that the Democratic Party is currently fighting to get undocumented people?
The law states that if someone shows up in the emergency room, you have to cover them.
Not
that
just
is
that.
the law.
No, it uses a very specific term. So I'm glad you asked about this, because I, as a Republican, was also I feel like most people at this table, we are skeptics of politicians.
Yes.
And I think both sides are completely weaponizing
They lie.
this shutdown
Totally.
for their own
Yeah.
political gain. And I think I hate that we even live in a country where Congress even has the ability to shut down the government. I don't even think that should be a possibility. I think that if you want to shut down the government, that means you're not eligible to run for re-election next time.
But more
Maybe
Well,
they
no,
want their
also, you
paychecks.
should not
Once
be
they
paid.
quit their
Hold on,
motivation.
it's not their paycheck.
This is a side point, but like, if the government is shut down, the federal government shouldn't have the right to tax us.
Well,
they're still
at the
collecting
very
our taxes.
least,
paycheck,
you know who's the
honestly.
only people who's getting paid right now? It's
Right.
Congress. Why are
Yes.
they getting paid for
Yes,
doing
so they have no
Right.
incentive
If that
to
was
stop
taken away, how
this.
quickly do you guys think they would be able to magically
Yeah.
find a solution?
Exactly. So true.
But this provision, so I was skeptical that Republicans were, it's interesting. The shutdown is allowing both sides to have their weakest issue exposed. Democrats are extremely weak on illegal immigration. I think it's why they lost the 2024 election, all 7 swing states. Republicans are extremely weak on the issue of health care, have always been, have proven that they continue to be. There's no good signs going forward that they're going to get any better. And that should be a huge wake-up call to Republicans, because I think the 2028 election will be decided on the issue of health care.
Really?
But let's get into the provisions that the Democrats are fighting for. It's a very specific term that they use. They want to extend health care coverage again for people who are lawfully present in the country. Well, what does lawfully present mean? Lawfully present means parolees, refugees, and anybody who has come here claiming asylum. Now, that all sounds all fine and good and doesn't sound like illegal immigrants, except when you look into the fact that under the Biden administration, everybody who came across the southern border was a parolee, a refugee, and an asylum claim. They were just letting people in, showing up. You had military-age males showing up at the southern border saying, "Hi, I'm here to claim asylum." And they go, "Okay, well, where are your wife and kids?" "Oh, they're back in the country that isn't politically stable for me to be in, but they can stay there." "Okay, come on in. You got an asylum claim. Here's a court date. You're released into the interior, never to be seen again." So it's just a language game. It absolutely, Democrats are fighting to extend that health care coverage for illegal immigrants they're just not calling it that.
So you are
They're
right about
calling
that.
it lawfully
Yes, but
present.
it's also, there's something in addition to that. We have to talk about the emergency rooms. And this is a huge deal because it's gotten to the point where people understand how the system works. They know that if they show up, they have to be dealt with. So a lot of these people, it's not, by the way, it's not just legal aliens, and I'm 100% with you on this, 100%. As a legal immigrant myself, I take profound offense at the people who exploit the system. But we have people just showing up willy-nilly to the emergency room expecting care because they know they can't be turned away. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, no less, not known to be a left-wing organization, illegal aliens' health care, it costs us $150 billion on an annual basis. That is money that we don't have. And I want to kindly remind folks that we are at $38 trillion in debt. We can't afford this anymore.
So, but my question about that is, what do you do when someone literally has a medical emergency and ends up in the what's your solution to that? Because we do have, whether we like it or not, there are people here, they're undocumented, and some of them are going to experience medical emergencies. Do you want the emergency rooms to turn them away?
Well, healthcare is a triage system because right now our system is overtaxed. We spend 20% of our GDP on healthcare.
Yep.
We are a first-class world with third-class outcomes.
That's
and part of it
true.
is because our hospital system is strained. So in my opinion, we just have to triage and prioritize the people who are most in need, yes, but also American citizens. But I'm talking about the people who they don't have a gunshot wound. I'm talking about the people who just, they look fine, but they just want, an annual checkup or something, and you use emergency room as healthcare, because there are cases like that. I'm not talking about the people who are on their deathbed.
I think Americans are some of the most generous, kind, giving people out there, and that they actually don't have a problem allowing illegal immigrants to gain access to emergency services. Like you said, the scenario you're painting is like, what do you do when somebody shows up at the ER? And by the way, I don't know any physician on call who would turn
them.
away somebody on the basis of immigration status. And I don't think the American people are asking that. I think what the American people are asking for is, do we all know what the number one source of credit card debt for Americans is?
It's medical debt.
It's medical debt.
Yeah.
It's medical
College,
debt.
right?
So if you provide them some relief, the American people are asking for some relief for their healthcare costs.
Totally
and that's
agree.
why I bash Republicans.
Look, this is
Because
why
you
I
guys
think
suck.
this is why someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I
Yes.
used to just putting all my cards on the table. I used to loathe her, right? But I actually have grown to respect her because I realized, you know, when she talks about wanting to take care of the American people, she's not just BSing all of us. And the fact that she's willing to call out her own party in the area of healthcare, the fact that they've been wanting to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
And what's their plan?
And
they never have a plan.
But
they never have a plan.
I also agree with you in regard to the flaws of the Affordable Care Act. The fact that you need the federal government to subsidize the Affordable Care Act in order to make the premiums affordable means that it is inherently flawed. So I agree with you on that. But we haven't really seen any replacement ideas or any real solutions
for a decade.
From the opponents.
Republicans keep saying, let's just hand it to the private market. There's also another element of the Affordable Care Act that I really like to point out. It's the pre-existing conditions component, meaning that if you have pre-existing, well, it's a good idea in theory, but let me tell you what happens in practice. It means putting all the sick people and the healthy people who are in the same pool now. And what happens? What does an insurance company need to do to become profitable? They need to raise premiums across the board, regardless of whether you yourself are sick or not. So it becomes unsustainable in that way. That's why they needed the subsidies to begin with, because we had deeply sick people along with healthy people. I really think that's a huge weakness of the system, although there are some aspects that I like. For instance, if you're 26 years old, up until 26, you can stay on your parents' plan, which I think is a fantastic idea. But until we solve that fundamentally it's a fundamental math problem.
I think one of the biggest issues with our healthcare system is how, I mean, you see stories about it where if you have health insurance, the providers, meaning the hospitals, the doctors, will essentially charge a certain amount to get authorized to the health insurance companies. And it's usually an insanely inflated amount, outrageously priced, because they know they're going to have to negotiate with the health insurance companies, and it'll whittle down somewhat, but not by much. Even what that final figure is, when you compare that to what the hospitals or the providers charge someone who doesn't have health insurance at all, I mean, it's night and day.
Absolutely.
And so the whole system from top to bottom is so flawed.
But these subsidies, it's funny, the subsidies, I don't agree with Democrats holding the government hostage over subsidies that were always designed to be temporary. Again, I'm like,
by the way, I do want to say they pretended they were temporary, but they knew that was the only way to get the legislation passed. But I think in the back of their minds, they're like, it's kind of like the Social Security situation. Once you give it to them, it's hard to take it back.
But in black letter law, it says 2 years time's up.
Saying,
so I'm like, you know,
I think all along.
Yeah, I think they thought they were going to win the election and they didn't. So like, don't take it for granted. My sense is you want to keep those subsidies, win elections. But the subsidies themselves, to your point about what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, the subsidies themselves actually, yes, benefit Republican voters, but moreover than that, they actually benefit the American middle class.
Yes.
The extension of these subsidies says there's no longer a 400% cap on being 400% above the federal poverty line to get these subsidies. Well, when you hear 400% above the poverty line, what number rang through your head? My number was a lot higher than what it actually is.
Yeah, same.
For a single individual, that means you're making about $65,000 a year. And for a family of four, it means you're making $128,000 a year. That is the American middle class.
Yes.
And the fact that this subsidy said we're going to take that cap away so that if you're in those brackets, you can have access to somebody, that is helping the American middle class. Why are Republicans voting against that part?
Right.
That is
Caroline,
so stupid.
I completely agree with you, but ultimately it is helping the bottom line of the insurance industry, and that is unacceptable. We have a fee-for-service model, which is completely broken. Until we shatter that, we're going to be stuck in this quagmire, because it is, frankly, morally reprehensible that United Healthcare, that Independence Blue Cross, that all of these giants, they are making money hand over fist.
Well, and that should be
and
the
the
red
subsidies
flag.
are going into the pockets of these healthcare industries, their pockets.
It's such a corrupt system. And so, I think everyone's making really good points. I'm going to ask one final question, then I'd like to move on. And it's just kind of going back to the whole immigrant argument, because, look, I'm going to put my cards on the table again. I feel that if you're here in this country and you're, let's say, seeking asylum, you're not working and you're not paying taxes, I think that it's a valid argument to make that you shouldn't get these benefits that the American people have worked hard, paid taxes into, and should receive services from if they need those services. But if you are here, you're not quite an American citizen, but you're here legally, you're awaiting your court date or whatever, and you've been given a worker's visa and you are paying federal taxes, do you think those individuals should be covered by some of our public services?
They have a visa?
I mean, they have the option.
That they have a worker's visa and they are paying
okay,
taxes.
if they're legally
They have the
here,
option to
if
apply.
they have a visa.
I mean, it depends on your income circumstances. So anybody, I mean, Lindy, I'm sure that you were, when you went through the process, they tell you that you're able to qualify for benefits when you're approximately halfway through the process. It's even before you get the green card, before you get the permanent residency and everything like that.
Yeah.
They do give you that during the interim waiting period, so long as you meet certain income thresholds.
And
so
I'm in favor of that because I think if you're playing by the rules, you're contributing to our society, and then you should qualify for some of these benefits.
Absolutely. And let me be clear, I am not in any way for people being turned away when they come to the emergency room either. I think we need a two-tone approach. One that is addressing the illegal immigration at its root issue.
I agree.
Getting out the people who don't need to be here, and then simultaneously finding better solutions and prioritizing American citizens when it comes to healthcare and things like this. But I don't think that the solution to speed up that process is going to be turning away illegal immigrants from the emergency room.
It's not, but I do think the law is very clear who is legal and who is not, and lawfully present does not meet the definition of legally here in this country. If you're here on a work visa, if you're here going through the legal immigration process, you're already document system, completely different. But you also cannot go anywhere near the line of, I think, offering up free healthcare to illegal immigrants, because we have finally gotten our southern border under control. Zero border crossings as of the last 3 months. The second you give free healthcare to illegal immigrants, you are going to invite
that's a billboard
mass migration. That is a billboard asking everybody.
Not only that, it's just it's unfair to American taxpayers.
Yes.
It just is. So
I know we gotta move on. I have just a quick analogy, just to give viewers an easy way to understand this. If you are in a lifeboat, okay, you cannot get everyone around you in the boat because the boat will sink. You fill it to capacity, so much so the boat can keep on carrying on, but you can't possibly get everyone. And that is the argument against somehow accommodating the 12 million illegal aliens. No, my view is that we got to take care of the American people first, because resources are finite.
Yes. What's up, guys? Amy Dangerfield here. If you liked that video and you want to watch more like it, I need you to click over to YouTube, search up Her Take, and click subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.